I was 29 when my family held their annual Anderson Family Investment Trust meeting. This wasn't just any meeting, it was a tradition that had been passed down for 3 generations. The men of the family gathered in my grandfather's study to talk about stock portfolios, market strategies, and how to preserve wealth. It was always Dad, Uncle Bob, Uncle Tom, my older brother Marcus, and my cousin Derek. 5 men in expensive suits, discussing money that they'd mostly inherited, and then there was me, the only woman in the room, sitting quietly by the window, expected to observe, to learn from the professionals. The meeting felt like a club I wasn't quite a part of, but I was learning more than they knew. The Anderson family had a certain way of doing things when it came to money. It wasn't something that was discussed openly, but if you watched closely, you'd notice it. Every year, we had this meeting, the Anderson Family Investment Trust meeting, where the men would sit around and talk about the trust. They'd talk about how it was growing, how it was being managed, and how they could preserve the wealth my great-grandfather had started with. The family trust, which started out with a solid foundation, had grown into a $40 million portfolio over the years. And for the men of the family, it was all about continuing that legacy. But their approach was, let's say, a little more hands-off. See, the reality was they didn't manage the portfolio at all. Not really. They paid a company, Wellington Investment Management, a hefty 1.5% fee annually to handle everything. In exchange, they got these glossy reports that made it look like they knew what was going on. But behind those reports, it was all just a well-maintained illusion. They would meet every year, nodding along as the professionals talked about market complexities and investment strategies. And for the most part, they were happy to let someone else handle it. They didn't want to dive into the nitty-gritty details, didn't want to put in the work. They trusted the pros to do that for them. So every year they'd sit there and congratulate themselves on how brilliant they were at preserving wealth, not realizing that most of the heavy lifting was being done by Wellington. Now, here's where it got tricky for me. I was a girl in a family that treated money, investments, and business like an exclusive boys' club. No one ever really said it out loud, but it was understood. The men made the decisions. The women, well, we had our roles. My mother managed the household accounts, making sure the bills were paid and that things ran smoothly on a day-to-day basis. My aunts, they handled charitable contributions, making sure the family gave back in the right ways. But the serious money, the investment strategies, that was a man's business. And when I was growing up, that was just the way it was. It wasn't that I didn't try to break into it. At 16, I was curious, really curious. I remember asking my dad one day, why can't women be part of the trust? Why can't we help make these decisions? He just patted my head and smiled. Sweetheart, investing is a man's job. It requires a certain kind of analytical mindset. You're much better at creative things like art or, organizing events. Leave the serious stuff to us. And that was it. I never asked again. I didn't want to be dismissed. And besides, I had to accept that this was just how things were. Or so I thought. But I couldn't just let it go. If they weren't going to let me in, fine. I'd find my own way. I started reading everything I could get my hands on. My dad had this library full of books about investing, about the stock market, about strategies for wealth management. Funny thing was, none of the books had been opened in years. They were pristine. They were just there for show. Really. But I dug through them, read every page. I took economics in high school, majored in finance in college, just a practical degree. Nothing too ambitious. According to Dad, he thought I'd become a bank teller or something boring like that. But that wasn't my plan. Not at all. By the time I was a senior in college, I'd saved up $3,000 from summer jobs. And I opened a brokerage account. I made small trades at first, nothing big, just experimenting. It wasn't about making money right away, it was about learning. I had this gut feeling for the market, this intuition. I started seeing patterns in the way stocks moved. I studied them, got better with every mistake. And every time I made a mistake, I learned from it, and it taught me how to make better decisions next time. By the time I was 23, my $3,000 had turned into $45,000. When I was 25, I had $280,000 in my portfolio. And I didn't stop there. I didn't need to. I worked at a financial firm as an analyst. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the perfect training ground. I worked hard, lived modestly, and reinvested every penny. I saw the value in the long-term game. Meanwhile, the men in my family were still sitting back, still letting Wellington handle everything for them. They'd say they were thinking generationally, but all they were doing was letting someone else manage the money for them, all the while paying a hefty fee for it. By 27, my portfolio was worth $1.8 million. And that's when I started really looking at the Anderson Family Investment Trust. I had this feeling that something wasn't right. I had this growing suspicion that the trust wasn't being managed as well as it could be. I started asking questions, casual questions at first. Uncle Tom, how's your portfolio performing, Marcus? Are you happy with Wellington, Derek? Do you ever think about managing your own investments? The answers I got were revealing. Uncle Tom was frustrated with the underperformance. Marcus didn't like paying the 1.5% management fee. Derek, he didn't even care enough to look at his statements anymore. It was all the same, a bunch of people who had inherited money and were letting it sit there, being managed by someone else. That's when I knew it was time to make my move. When I first started investing, it wasn't about trying to get rich overnight. It wasn't even about beating my family at their game. It was just about learning, getting better, and seeing where it could take me. I had no big expectations, just a $3,000 investment from summer jobs, and a burning curiosity about the stock market. I opened my brokerage account as soon as I could, right in the middle of my senior year in college. I didn't have a lot of money to work with, but that didn't matter. It was all about the experience. Small trades, small positions, just testing the waters. I wasn't really expecting to make much money at first. I was learning through my mistakes, figuring out what worked and what didn't. But there was something about the markets, something about reading the charts and watching the movements that just clicked for me. It felt like I had an instinct for it. I spent hours reading everything I could, diving into market analysis, company reports, and investing strategies. Most of what I read was stuff my dad had sitting on his shelves, pristine, unread. But I devoured them. I didn't have much in the way of guidance. And I couldn't really ask anyone in my family. They had their way of doing things. And that didn't include me. So I was on my own. And maybe that's what pushed me harder. I saw that no one in my family really understood investing, despite all their talk. They had inherited their wealth, and they treated it like a trophy to be polished, not something to be grown or managed actively. They paid Wellington Investment Management to do the work, while they patted themselves on the back for being good stewards of the family money. At first, my trades were small. I wasn't out there betting the farm or anything, just testing strategies, keeping my risk low. But with every trade, I got better. And by the time I was 23, I had turned that initial $3,000 into $45,000. It didn't happen by accident. It was the result of a lot of research, a lot of trial and error, and honestly, a lot of patience. The markets weren't going to hand me anything, and I wasn't going to get rich quick. But I understood the value of steady growth. I understood how to spot patterns, how to find solid stocks, and how to reinvest profits. And slowly but surely, that $3,000 kept growing. By 25, I had reached $280,000, and that's when things really started to take off. I had worked as a financial analyst for a couple of years by that point, I had seen how the professionals worked, how the industry operated, and I had learned a lot from that. I was living modestly, saving aggressively, and investing strategically. I got in on the growth stock wave early and sold before the corrections hit. I wasn't trying to chase every trend, but I was making calculated moves. While my family continued to pay Wellington their annual fee, while they sat around in Grandpa's study every year discussing how well things were going, I was quietly outperforming them. My personal portfolio was growing faster than anything Wellington had ever managed for the Anderson Family Trust. By 27, I had $1.8 million. And that's when I started to really pay attention to what was going on with the family trust. I'd seen enough to know that Wellington wasn't doing what they claimed to be doing. They weren't managing the trust the way they should have been, and the returns weren't anything to brag about. I knew because I was beating them. Every year, they sent out reports that looked impressive to my dad and uncles, but I saw through them. I was outpacing Wellington's performance by 6 percentage points every year. They were barely keeping pace with the S&P 500. I was surpassing it consistently. Meanwhile, the family was happy to let the professionals do the heavy lifting. My dad and uncles sat around and discussed stock portfolios, markets, and trends, except they weren't actually managing anything. They were letting someone else do that. And Wellington, they didn't care about the family's long-term wealth. They cared about their fees. I could see that, and I started to feel frustrated. They thought they were in control, but they weren't. They were paying for someone else's expertise, all while patting themselves on the back for making smart moves. I didn't need anyone to manage my money. I was doing fine on my own, thanks to the work I'd put in and the knowledge I'd gained. And as my portfolio grew, I started to wonder, why couldn't I manage the Anderson Family Trust? Why couldn't I take control of the money that was supposed to be the family's wealth? They'd been letting someone else do it for years. Why not me? So I began to look deeper into the structure of the trust, and what I discovered was interesting. The trust was a limited partnership, and the shares could be bought and sold with the right paperwork. That's when I started to make my move. I started asking my family casual questions at dinners, nothing too suspicious. How's your portfolio doing, Uncle Tom? Are you happy with Wellington? Marcus? I started planting seeds. I wanted to know where everyone stood. The answers I got, let's just say they weren't great. Uncle Tom was frustrated with the returns. Marcus thought the management fees were too high. Derek, he didn't care at all. Sikhat, he hadn't even looked at his statements in months. They were all just sitting on their shares, hoping things would get better without ever actually doing anything. I saw an opportunity, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. So I made offers, private, quiet offers, to Uncle Tom, to Marcus, to Derek, and one by one, they took the deals. I started buying up their shares, quietly acquiring control. I was careful, strategic, and over the course of 18 months, I had accumulated 65% of the Anderson Family Investment Trust. And none of them had any idea how it had happened. They were still sitting around, patting themselves on the back, while I was taking control of the wealth they thought they'd inherited. The thing was, they didn't realize just how bad things were until I made my move. They thought they were in control, but they weren't. I wasn't going to just keep letting Wellington take their fees and underperform. I was going to do something about it. I was going to do it my way. I remember the exact moment I realized I could take control of the Anderson Family Investment Trust. It wasn't something that happened overnight, but looking back, there were little signs along the way that led me to this point. It all started with one simple question: why can't I do this myself? As I watched my family sit around the table year after year, talking about how the trust was doing, I couldn't help but notice something. There was a lot of talk about the trust's performance, but no one was really managing it. Sure, they had Wellington Investment Management overseeing everything, but Wellington was just a hired hand. My family was paying them a 1.5% fee each year to manage the portfolio. But from where I was sitting, they weren't doing much more than making sure the money was sitting in a few diversified, mostly underperforming funds. And even though my family was patting themselves on the back for smart investing, I knew that Wellington wasn't doing anything special with the trust. I had already proven to myself that I could make better decisions better than Wellington, better than my family, who seemed content to let someone else do the heavy lifting. I started to dig deeper into the trust structure. It wasn't enough to just watch from the sidelines. I needed to understand the legal and financial framework that supported it. The more I learned, the clearer it became the trust was structured as a limited partnership. That meant, with the right paperwork, shares in the trust could be bought, sold, or transferred. That was the key. All these years, my dad, Uncle Bob, and the others had treated the percentages of ownership as if they were set in stone, unchangeable. But they weren't. The shares weren't locked in place. The family could sell them, trade them, or gift them as long as the paperwork was filed correctly. The realization hit me like a lightning bolt, and that's when I started planting the seeds. I knew it would be a slow game. If I just charged in and asked to take control right away, I'd raise suspicion. So I started asking questions, casual questions, as if I was just curious. I'd ask Uncle Tom how his portfolio was doing, or Marcus if he was happy with Wellington's performance. I even asked Derek, "Do you ever think about managing your own investments?" The answers I got were more revealing than I expected. Uncle Tom, for example, was frustrated with the performance. He'd been paying Wellington all these years and wasn't seeing the returns he'd hoped for. Marcus wasn't exactly thrilled with the 1.5% management fee they were paying either. In fact, he was thinking about starting his own business venture and didn't care much for the trust at all. And Derek had never really been interested in the trust. He didn't even bother looking at his statements. The more I learned, the more I realized that none of them were emotionally or financially invested in the trust's success. They'd inherited it, yes, but they hadn't put in the effort to understand how it worked, let alone take control of it. So I started making offers, quiet offers, in private. "Uncle Tough," I said, "I'll buy your 20% stake in the trust for $8.5 million. It's above market value for your share, and I think it's a fair offer." At first, he was skeptical. I don't blame him. It's not every day someone comes to you and offers to buy your stake in a multi-million-dollar trust. But I showed him my personal portfolio returns. I showed him how I'd been outperforming Wellington by 6 percentage points every year for the last 5 years. I told him, "I can manage this trust better than Wellington, and I think it's time someone in the family actually understood investing instead of just inheriting it." After seeing my numbers, he started to consider it, and when I made him the offer, he took it. Next, I turned to Marcus. I already knew he didn't care much about the trust, but he did need capital for his new restaurant venture. So I offered him a fair price for his 10% stake, and without hesitation, he agreed. Derek, who was the least interested in the trust, was next. He had no interest in managing his shares, and honestly, he was just happy to get the cash. So I bought his 5% stake without any issue. Over the course of 18 months, I had quietly acquired 65% of the Anderson Family Investment Trust. The total cost was around $22 million. I had leveraged my portfolio, used some creative option strategies, and strategically bought the shares from my family members. The transactions were all handled through legal entities, processed quietly through the trust's administrative framework. None of them had any idea what I was up to. By the time I had acquired my 65% stake, I was in full control. And the beauty of it was, no one knew. The trust required annual shareholder meetings, but the voting was done by percentage of ownership. With 65%, I had full control. I could fire Wellington. I could change the investment strategy. I could restructure the entire trust. But I hadn't told anyone yet. I didn't need to. The plan was already in motion, and I had all the time in the world to execute it. The first thing I did was fire Wellington. I had the authority to do that as majority shareholder, and I wasn't about to keep paying them 1.5% of the trust's value for subpar performance. I brought everything in-house, creating a registered investment advisor structure to manage the assets. The 1.5% fee disappeared, and with it, so did the excuse for underperformance. The next move was to restructure the portfolio. I was no longer going to let the trust's money sit in low-growth, overpriced mutual funds. I moved the portfolio into index funds and direct stock positions, things I knew would provide better returns with lower costs. I also introduced more active management, something Wellington had never done. They had just been shuffling around money and collecting fees. I wasn't going to make that mistake. I paid attention. I followed the market closely. I knew how to spot opportunities, how to buy when others were selling, and how to sell when others were buying. I wasn't going to let this trust stagnate under my watch. And the results spoke for themselves. The trust went from $40 million to $68 million in just 18 months. Wellington had been reporting returns of around 12% annually. Under my management, we were up 26% that year. I wasn't just outperforming Wellington, I was outperforming my family's expectations too. The trust's performance was better, and there was no management fee. But the best part was that no one knew. I still attended the annual family meetings, sitting quietly in the corner as they discussed how well the trust was doing. They were congratulating themselves for a 14% return, while I was sitting there, silently managing it all from behind the scenes. I didn't need their approval. I was already winning, and eventually, they would realize it too. The meeting had always been a formality. Every year, the family gathered in Grandpa's old study, sat around the massive wooden table, and discussed how the Anderson Family Investment Trust was doing. This year, however, things were different. This time, I wasn't just observing from the side. I was the one holding all the cards. It all came to a head when Dad started flipping through the old reports from Wellington. He was reading the numbers aloud, acting like nothing had changed. Wellington's Q4 report shows strong performance. We're up 14% for the year, he announced, settling back in his chair, confident as ever. Uncle Bob nodded in agreement. Excellent management. This is why we pay professionals, he said. My heart almost couldn't contain the laughter. They were congratulating themselves on a return that wasn't even accurate anymore. They had no idea how much had actually changed. That's when I decided to speak up. I couldn't keep quiet any longer. I looked around the table, my voice steady but full of quiet confidence. Actually, we're up 26%, not 14%, I said calmly. And for a moment, you could hear a pin drop. Dad's face froze. Uncle Bob stopped nodding. Marcus, who had been distracted by his phone, looked up, clearly confused. I continued. We're at $68 million now, not $40 million. I've restructured everything, fired Wellington, and improved the strategy. We've doubled the trust's value, and we're outperforming the professionals you've been relying on. Dad's expression was one of pure disbelief. What do you mean? You've restructured everything. You can't just fire Wellington. You don't have the authority to... He stammered, his voice rising with confusion and anger. But I wasn't backing down. I had every right to make those changes. I held 65% of the trust now. My vote was the only one that mattered. I looked him square in the eye and said, Actually, I do. As majority shareholder, I had the full authority to make those decisions. And I did. The results speak for themselves. Uncle Bob's face turned pale. This is impossible, he muttered under his breath. You don't have the expertise to manage a trust like this. You're just a financial analyst. This is way beyond you. I could see the doubt in his eyes, the dismissive way he was trying to belittle me, but I didn't flinch. I may not be a professional wealth manager, but I know more about managing this trust than Wellington ever did, I said, my voice firm. I've been doing this for years, outperforming the S&P 500, and now I'm doing it for the Anderson family. At that moment, Uncle Tom, who had been quiet up until now, spoke up. I don't regret selling my shares to you, he said, his voice calm but acknowledging. Since you took over, my share has increased by 30%, better than Wellington ever did. It was a small victory, but it felt big. Derek, too, chimed in. Same here, he said, nodding. I've actually learned more from your reports than I ever did from Wellington. You've been sending detailed analysis, not just some generic market commentary. But it was Dad's reaction that hit hardest. He was standing now, pacing in the room, his hands running through his hair in frustration. This is insane, he said, his voice trembling with disbelief. You can't just take control of the family trust. You're a woman. You don't know what you're doing. The words were out before he could stop them, and I felt the sting, but I didn't let it shake me. I stood tall and looked him straight in the eye. I've built a $12 million portfolio from scratch. Dad, I've been investing since college. I've spent years learning, growing, and outperforming your so-called professionals. I'm better at this than anyone in this room. For a moment, there was silence. Then Dad's voice cracked as he turned to me. When did you even learn all this? How did I not know? He looked defeated, like he couldn't comprehend how he had missed everything. You didn't know because you never asked, I said quietly. You assumed I was incapable, dismissed me, and underestimated me. You told me to stick to savings accounts and build my life on the money you gave me. Well, I did it my way. I built something better. The room was heavy with tension, but something shifted in the air. Uncle Tom looked at me with a new kind of respect. Marcus, too, seemed to recognize the weight of the situation. Uncle Bob, though still skeptical, was quiet for once, as if unsure how to respond. But Dad, well, Dad wasn't ready to give in. He stood there, processing, still grappling with the reality that his daughter had outsmarted him, outperformed him, and taken control of something he'd always considered his finally, after what seemed like an eternity of silence. Dad spoke again. I didn't want this for you, he said, his voice cracking. I didn't want you to have to fight for it, to prove it. I thought I was protecting you. I felt the weight of his words, but I didn't back down. You weren't protecting me, Dad. You were protecting your ego. You were afraid to admit that I could do it better than you. And for the first time in my life, I realized that I didn't need his approval. I didn't need any of their validation. I had built something on my own, and now they had to face it. I had taken control, and they had to live with the reality that they had been wrong about me all along. In the weeks that followed, things started to shift in the family. I continued to manage the trust, of course, and the results just kept getting better. We had gone from $40 million to $82 million in just 2 years under my management, with returns that far outpaced anything my family had ever seen before. But it wasn't just the money that was changing, it was the way the family saw me. My father, for all his initial resistance, came around. It wasn't immediate, and it wasn't easy. But over time, I saw a change in him. 6 weeks after that fateful meeting, we met for coffee, just the two of us. He seemed older, more worn down somehow, and I could tell he had been doing a lot of thinking. I've been reviewing the trust reports, he said, stirring his coffee slowly, actually reading them this time, not just glancing at the summary. He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw real acknowledgement in his eyes. Your analysis is thorough, professional, It's better than Wellington's. Honestly, I owe you an apology, a real one. It wasn't just about the trust. It was about the years of dismissing me, of pushing me aside, telling me that investing wasn't for women, that I wasn't cut out for the real work. But there we were, sitting at that coffee shop, and he was telling me he was proud of me. He admitted that he'd tried to protect me, but all along he was just trying to protect his own ego. I didn't want to admit that you might be better at this than me, he said quietly. I let it sink in. It's okay, Dad, I said, my voice calm. But you have to understand, things are different now. I'm not asking for your approval anymore. I'm making decisions that are best for the trust, for the family, whether you're comfortable with it or not. And then, with a slight smile, I added, but I appreciate the apology. It means a lot. The family dynamic was changing, slowly but surely. Uncle Tom, Derek, and Marcus had all come around, too. They saw the results. They started to respect me for what I had built, not just financially, but as a woman in a place that had always been reserved for men. And for the first time in years, my family was actually talking about opening up the trust to the women in the family, giving them the same financial education and opportunities that had always been reserved for the men. I had proven that I belonged, not just in the family business, but in the world of finance. And now, it wasn't just about me. It was about what I had opened up for the next generation. The women in the family, who had once been excluded, were now seeing what was possible. They were asking questions, wanting to learn. The door had been opened, and the future was brighter than it had ever been. And that's where the story truly begins, because breaking barriers isn't just about one person's success. It's about showing everyone, especially the women who've been told they can't, that it's possible. I proved that with the right knowledge, persistence, and a little courage. We can take control of our own destinies, whether it's managing a family trust, building wealth, or pursuing our dreams in any field. The journey wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And the best part, I didn't just change my own life. I opened the door for the next generation to walk through with confidence. So if you've learned something from this story, if it's inspired you to take charge of your own financial future or challenge the limits others set for you, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And hey, if you want to hear more stories like this and dive deeper into breaking barriers, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Financial empowerment is something we all deserve, and the more we support each other, the stronger we become. Thanks for watching, and remember, don't wait for permission. Go out there and make your own path.